Hollywood's biggest smile met its match last night when Tom Cruise stormed off the set of Jimmy Kimmel's show after a promotional interview spiraled into a heated confrontation. What began as standard late-night banter quickly descended into personal attacks, leaving audiences stunned and social media ablaze with reactions. The red on-air sign glowed steadily above Studio 1A at El Capitan Entertainment Center on Hollywood Boulevard. The audience buzzed with anticipation as the band played the final notes of the show's theme. Jimmy Kimmel adjusted his tie, flashed his trademark grin to the camera, and launched into his monologue with practiced ease. "Tonight, we have one of Hollywood's biggest stars joining us. He's jumped off buildings, hung from planes, and somehow managed to stay the same height for 30 years. Please welcome Tom Cruise." The audience erupted in applause as Cruise bounded onto the stage with his characteristic enthusiasm, all gleaming, smile and confident stride. He waved to the crowd, gave Kimmel a firm handshake, and settled into the guest chair, looking relaxed in a navy suit and crisp white shirt. "Tom, welcome back to the show," Kimmel said, leaning forward slightly. "It's been what, 3 years?" "That's right, Jimmy. Great to be back," Cruise replied, his energy palpable. "I've been busy, but it's always good to see you and connect with the fans." The interview began smoothly enough, with standard questions about Cruise's latest action, film, a globe-trotting spy thriller that industry insiders were already calling his best work in years. "So you did your own stunts again," Kimmel said, displaying footage of Cruise scaling the exterior of a skyscraper. "At your age, doesn't insurance become an issue? I mean, my knees hurt just watching this." Cruise laughed good-naturedly. "You know me, Jimmy. I want to give the audience an authentic experience, and I've got a great team to make sure everything's safe." The audience clapped appreciatively, but keen observers might have noticed a subtle shift in Kimmel's demeanor. His smile tightened slightly, his eyes narrowed. When the applause died down, he pivoted unexpectedly. "Speaking of teams," Kimmel said, his tone shifting, "I can't help but notice that some of your longtime collaborators are missing from this project, particularly people associated with certain organizations you've been involved with." A momentary flicker crossed Cruise's face, surprise quickly masked by professionalism. "I work with talented people from all backgrounds, Jimmy. This film brought together some incredible artists." Right, Kimmel pressed, ignoring the sudden tension. "But you have to admit, your personal associations have affected your career. Some would say not for the better." The audience grew quiet. This wasn't the light-hearted banter they'd expected. Cruise shifted in his seat, maintaining his composure. "I'm here to talk about the film, which I'm incredibly proud of. It's a story about overcoming impossible odds." "Much like overcoming public perception?" Kimmel interrupted. "Because let's be honest, Tom, you've been connected to some controversial figures over the years. People have questions." The studio temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Cruise's smile remained, but no longer reached his eyes. "Everyone's entitled to their beliefs, Jimmy. I respect that, but I'm here as an artist. To discuss my work." Kimmel leaned back, an air of false casualness about him. "Fair enough. Let's talk about the film's relationships then. Your character has this complex family dynamic. Nothing like yours in real life, right?" The barb was unmistakable, referencing Cruise's complicated personal history that had been tabloid fodder for years. Something changed in Cruise's expression, a hardening around the edges, a steeliness entering his gaze. "You know, Jimmy," Cruise said carefully, "I've always appreciated how you create a space where guests can share their work with your audience. That's why I came tonight." "And we appreciate you coming," Kimmel responded with exaggerated politeness, "though I think the audience might appreciate some honesty, too. They see the movies, but they don't get to ask the questions everyone's thinking." Cruise placed his hands on his knees, his posture straightening. "I've always been honest about my work, which is what I'm here to discuss. If you have questions about the stunts, the character development, the themes. "Oh, come on, Tom," Kimmel interrupted again, his facade of friendliness slipping further. "You can't expect to be this massive public figure and only talk about what you want to talk about. That's not how this works." The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the good-natured ribbing Kimmel was known for. There was an edge to his questioning that felt personal, almost hostile. "Actually, Jimmy," Cruz countered, his voice level but firm, "mutual respect is exactly how professional interactions work. Or at least, how they should work." Kimmel smirked. "Respect? That's interesting coming from you. What's that supposed to mean?" Cruz asked, his legendary control beginning to show cracks. "It means," Kimmel said, leaning forward, "that someone who's spent decades in a bubble of yes-men and handlers might have a skewed idea of what respect actually looks like in the real world." A ripple went through the audience, half shock, half uncomfortable anticipation. This was veering into unprecedented territory for the normally controlled environment of late-night television. Cruz uncrossed his legs and sat forward, mirroring Kimmel's posture. "I've worked with thousands of people over my career, Jimmy. Crews, directors, fellow actors, people from every walk of life. I respect them all, regardless of whether they agree with me on everything. And yet," Kimmel persisted, "certain people seem to vanish from your life when they no longer fit the narrative. Like your former—" "I think we should get back to discussing the film," Cruz interrupted firmly, the warmth gone from his voice. "The audience came for entertainment, not whatever this is becoming." Kimmel's eyes gleamed with something that looked unsettlingly like satisfaction at having provoked a reaction. "Oh, I think this is plenty entertaining. Don't you all agree?" he asked, turning to the audience, who responded with uncertain murmurs. The show cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling for the in-studio audience. Cruz leaned over to Kimmel, speaking in low tones. "What's going on here, Jimmy? This isn't what we discussed in the pre-interview." "Pre-interviews are guidelines, not scripts," Kimmel replied with a dismissive wave. "Besides, don't you think? People are tired of the same old promotional routine. I'm giving them something real." Cruz's jaw tightened visibly. Real would be respecting boundaries and having a genuine conversation about the work, not whatever axe you're trying to grind here. When the show returned from commercial, the tension remained palpable. Kimmel, rather than steering back to safer ground, doubled down. "So, Tom, before the break we were discussing how you manage relationships in your industry. Let's talk about your co-stars. There have been rumors about difficulties on set, particularly with your female leads finding you controlling. Care to comment on that?" The audience gasped audibly. Cruz's famous composure wavered for just a moment, revealing a flash of genuine anger beneath. "That's completely unfounded," Cruz replied, his voice tight. "I've worked with incredible actresses throughout my career. Ask any of them about our professional relationship." "I have, actually," Kimmel said, sliding a card from his pocket with theatrical flair. "We reached out to several of your former co-stars. Would you like to hear what they said?" Cruz's publicist shot up from her seat in the wings, making frantic, cutting motions at the producers. The floor director looked panicked, unsure whether to intervene. "Jimmy," Cruz said, maintaining remarkable control despite the ambush, "I don't know what game you're playing tonight, but it's unprofessional and disrespectful, not just to me, but to your audience." "Unprofessional?" Kimmel repeated with exaggerated surprise. "I'm just asking questions the public wants answered. Isn't that my job as an interviewer? Or are only pre-approved topics allowed in your presence?" A murmur ran through the audience. Some seemed uncomfortable with Kimmel's approach, while others leaned forward, captivated by the unfolding drama. "There's a difference between honest conversation and deliberately trying to provoke someone," Cruz countered. "You know that better than anyone." Kimmel smirked. "Maybe I just don't subscribe to the idea that certain people are above questioning." "This isn't about being above questioning," Cruz said, his legendary intensity now fully engaged. It's about basic professional courtesy. Professional courtesy, Kimmel echoed mockingly. Interesting phrase coming from someone who reportedly made a grip cry on set because they looked at you the wrong way. The accusation hung in the air like a live wire. Several audience members audibly gasped. Cruise stood abruptly, adjusting his jacket. That never happened, and you know it. For a moment it seemed like he might leave, but instead, he turned directly to face Kimmel. The camera operators scrambled to adjust their framing as Cruise stepped closer to Kimmel's desk, commandeering the moment. "I've spent over 40 years in this industry," Cruise said, his voice resonating with conviction. "I've worked on countless sets with thousands of crew members. I push for excellence. Yes, I have high standards. Absolutely. But I've always treated people with respect." Kimmel's expression wavered slightly. He hadn't expected Cruise to take control so effectively. "The stories I could tell about what really happens on talk shows like this," Cruise continued, gesturing around the studio. "How hosts like you behave when the cameras stop rolling. The way you talk about guests after they leave. Should we discuss that instead, Jimmy?" Now it was Kimmel's turn to look uncomfortable. The audience, sensing the shift in power dynamics, erupted in scattered applause for Cruise. "Let's take another commercial break," Kimmel said quickly, forcing a smile. "No," Cruise replied firmly. "You wanted real conversation? Let's have it." The floor director frantically signaled to cut to commercial anyway, but Cruise continued, speaking, aware the studio audience was still witnessing everything. "I came here tonight as a professional, to share a film that hundreds of people worked incredibly hard on. Instead, you've tried to ambush me with tabloid gossip and false accusations." Kimmel attempted to regain control. "Come on, Tom. You can't expect to control every conversation about yourself. That's part of celebrity." "This isn't about controlling conversations," Cruise interrupted. "It's about decency. Something that seems to be in short supply here. Tonight." During the commercial break, the tension in the studio was palpable. Cruise's publicist rushed to his side, whispering urgently. Makeup artists hovered nearby, uncertain whether to approach either man. Kimmel's producer engaged in intense conversation with the host, occasionally glancing nervously at Cruise. When the cameras started rolling again, both men had regained some composure, but the underlying tension remained electric. "Welcome back to the show," Kimmel said with forced cheerfulness. "Before the break, things got a little heated and—" "Let's be clear about what happened," Cruise interjected. "You made false allegations about my professional conduct. I was simply referencing reports that have circulated." "Unverified gossip," Cruise corrected. "And you presented it as fact. That's not journalism, Jimmy. It's not even good entertainment." Kimmel's smile tightened. "You know, for someone who claims to be so professional, you're certainly making this difficult." "I didn't make it difficult," Cruise replied evenly. "You decided before I walked out here that you weren't going to conduct a standard interview. You had an agenda." "My only agenda is giving my audience something genuine," Kimmel insisted. "Is that what this is?" Cruise gestured between them. "Because from where I'm sitting it looks like you're trying to boost ratings with manufactured controversy." The audience reacted with a mixture of uncomfortable laughter and stunned silence. They were witnessing something rare in the carefully choreographed world of late-night television: authentic conflict. "Speaking of manufactured," Kimmel said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "let's talk about your carefully constructed public image. The real Tom Cruise is quite different from the one you present, isn't he?" Cruise's eyes narrowed. "We all have public and private faces, Jimmy. I'm sure your staff could tell some interesting stories about the real Jimmy Kimmel when the cameras aren't rolling." A flash of genuine anger crossed Kimmel's face. "The difference is, I don't pretend to be something I'm not." "Really?" Cruise raised an eyebrow. "So this confrontational approach tonight, this is the real you? Not the friendly, funny host you present yourself as?" The studio grew uncomfortably quiet. Several audience members exchanged glances, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinarily unscripted. "At least I'm not hiding behind a wall of handlers and publicists," Kimmel retorted. "At least I don't have people sign NDAs just to have a conversation with me." Cruz leaned forward. "Is that what this is about? You're upset because there are boundaries around my personal life?" "I'm pointing out the hypocrisy," Kimmel said. "You present yourself as authentic while controlling every aspect of your public image." "There's nothing hypocritical about maintaining privacy," Cruz replied. "Everyone deserves that, even public figures." "Privacy is one thing," Kimmel pressed. "But what about the people whose careers have been affected by their associations? With you? What about your daughter?" "Stop." Cruz's voice cut through the studio like steel. "Family is off limits. You know that." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Even Kimmel appeared to realize he'd crossed a line. "I'm simply asking—" "No," Cruz interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You're not simply anything. You're deliberately trying to provoke a reaction, and I'm not going to give you the satisfaction." The studio fell silent. Even Kimmel seemed momentarily taken aback by Cruz's intensity. The host quickly tried to recover, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Come on, Tom. We're just having a conversation here. The audience wants authenticity." "Don't hide behind your audience," Cruz said, gesturing to the uncomfortable crowd. "They came for entertainment, not character assassination. Ask them if this is what they wanted to see tonight." Kimmel glanced at the audience, many of whom averted their eyes. Some were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Others were completely still, transfixed by the unfolding drama. "Look," Kimmel said, switching tactics. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Let's get back to the film." "No," Cruz said firmly. "You don't get to ambush me with personal attacks for 15 minutes and then pretend it didn't happen when it doesn't go your way." A smattering of applause broke out from the audience. Kimmel's face flushed. "Fine," he said, his artificial smile dropping entirely. "You want to talk about what's real? Let's talk about how impossible you are to work with. Let's talk about the stories everyone in Hollywood knows, but nobody says publicly because they're afraid of your power." Cruz shook his head, a look of disappointment crossing his features. "This is exactly the problem with entertainment media today. It's not about substance anymore. It's about creating conflict for clicks and views." "Oh, please," Kimmel scoffed. "Don't lecture me about media ethics when your entire career is built on carefully managed public relations." "My career is built on decades of hard work," Cruz countered, his voice steady but intense. "On set at 4 in the morning, learning complex skills for authenticity, putting my body on the line for performances, working with incredible directors and actors who challenge me to be better. And controlling every aspect of how you're presented," Kimmel added. "Being professional isn't the same as being controlling," Cruz said. "But you wouldn't know the difference, would you? Not with how you've conducted yourself tonight." The tension crackled between them. In the wings, producers were having frantic conversations. This was live television spiraling out of control, ratings gold but professionally disastrous. "You know what I think?" Kimmel said, leaning forward. "I think the real Tom Cruise can't handle not being in control for 5 minutes. I think behind that famous smile is someone terrified of letting people see who he really is." Something shifted in Cruise's expression. Not anger now, but a cold determination. "I've been in this business for over 40 years, Jimmy. I've done thousands of interviews. And in all that time, I've never encountered this level of unprofessionalism." He stood up, straightening his jacket. "We're done here." "So that's it?" Kimmel challenged, rising as well. "The moment things get uncomfortable, you walk away? What happened to being authentic?" Cruz turned to face him directly. "Authenticity doesn't mean subjecting yourself to disrespect. It means being true to your values. One of mine is not participating in someone else's hit job disguised as an interview. He turned to address the audience directly. I'm sorry you didn't get to hear about the film tonight. A lot of incredibly talented people worked hard on it, and they deserve better than this. As Cruise began to walk off stage, Kimmel made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation, or perhaps to deliver a parting blow. You know, Tom, maybe if you spent less time running away from difficult questions and more time addressing the controversies in your life, people wouldn't have so many of them. Cruise paused mid-stride. The studio held its collective breath. Slowly, he turned back to face Kimmel. The difference between us, Jimmy, is that I'll be answering for my choices and actions long after tonight. Will you? With that, he walked off the set, leaving Kimmel standing alone. The silence in the studio was deafening. The host stood frozen for a moment, visibly struggling to regain his composure. The camera operators exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to follow Cruise or stay fixed on Kimmel. Well, Kimmel finally said, his voice lacking its usual confidence, I guess Tom Cruise really does do all his own stunts, including disappearing acts. The joke fell flat, met with uncomfortable silence rather than laughter. In the corridor outside, Cruise's publicist caught up with him, already on the phone, damage controlling the situation. Tom, I'm so sorry. We had no idea he would— It's fine, Cruise said, his professional demeanor returning. These things happen. But it wasn't fine, and everyone knew it. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation were spreading across social media. Kimmel-Cruise crash began trending, with viewers taking sides in the unexpected clash of Hollywood heavyweights. Back in the studio, Kimmel attempted to salvage the remainder of his show. We'll be right back with musical guest Olivia Rodrigo, he announced, his smile strained. As soon as the cameras cut to commercial, he tore off his microphone and stormed backstage. What the hell was that? His executive producer demanded. That was reality television, Kimmel snapped. People will be talking about this for weeks. They'll be talking about how you ambushed one of the biggest stars in Hollywood for no reason, the producer countered. The network is already getting calls. Outside the studio, fans who had gathered to catch a glimpse of Cruise watched in surprise as he emerged earlier than expected. Despite the confrontation, he stopped to sign a few autographs, his professional mask firmly back in place. What happened in there, Mr. Cruise? One fan asked. Just a difference of opinion, he replied diplomatically, before his security team ushered him to a waiting car. By morning, the incident had exploded. Entertainment news programs ran the footage on repeat. Social media was divided, though the majority seemed to side with Cruise, commending his composure in the face of what many viewed as unprovoked hostility. Kimmel's team released a statement expressing regret that the conversation took an unexpected turn, but stopped short of an actual apology. Cruise's representatives maintained a dignified silence, allowing the footage to speak for itself. 3 days later, Kimmel's ratings had plummeted. Celebrities scheduled to appear on his show began canceling, unwilling to risk similar treatment. Network executives called emergency meetings to discuss the future of the show. Meanwhile, Cruise's film opened to record numbers, boosted by the publicity from the confrontation. In interviews with other shows, he graciously avoided discussing the Kimmel incident, focusing instead on praising his collaborators. A week after the confrontation, Kimmel finally issued a full apology on air, acknowledging that he had crossed professional boundaries. In trying to create a memorable television moment, he admitted, I forgot the basic respect that should exist between host and guest. The incident became a case study in entertainment journalism classes, a reminder that even in an age of confrontational media, there remained lines that shouldn't be crossed. For Cruise, it was another chapter in a complex career. For Kimmel, it was a harsh lesson in the limits of provocative entertainment. And for viewers, it was a rare glimpse behind the carefully maintained veneer of Hollywood cordiality, a moment when the script was abandoned, leaving nothing but raw human emotion under the bright studio lights.